Juliette Parker. The name itself sounds ordinary, unremarkable. Yet behind this simple name hid a woman of chilling complexity, a woman who would become synonymous with deceit, manipulation, and a crime so audacious it shook the very foundations of our community. This is the case of Juliette Parker, a deep dive into the mind of a woman who dared to challenge our perceptions. This is her story.
Juliette Parker lived a life seemingly plucked from a storybook. She resided in a charming, sun-drenched town nestled amidst rolling hills. Her neighbors knew her as a devoted wife, a doting mother to 2 cherubic children, and an active member of the local church choir. Her days were filled with PTA meetings, grocery shopping, and volunteering at the local animal shelter. Yet beneath this veneer of normalcy, a storm brewed. Behind Juliette's warm smile and gentle demeanor, a darker, more complex personality simmered. She yearned for a life less ordinary, a life of luxury and freedom. But the path to achieving this life, she believed, was fraught with obstacles. The seeds of Juliette's audacious plan were sown not in malice, but in desperation. Her husband, a kind-hearted but struggling artist, poured his soul into his paintings, but his work rarely found a buyer. Their financial situation, once comfortable, had become increasingly precarious. Mounting bills, looming mortgage payments, and the constant worry etched lines on Juliette's face. Then came the inheritance. A distant relative, someone Juliette barely knew, passed away, leaving behind a sizable fortune. But there was a catch. The inheritance was solely willed to her husband. Juliette's resentment began to boil. The idea, when it first took root in Juliette's mind, was small, almost insignificant. A seed of deceit planted in a fertile ground of desperation. She wouldn't steal the inheritance, not outright. No, her plan would be far more intricate, far more cunning. She would make it seem as if her husband, overwhelmed by their financial woes, had decided to disappear. She would weave a narrative of a man broken by pressure, a man who had simply walked away from his life. Juliette began to meticulously craft her plan, each detail carefully considered. She fabricated arguments, staged moments of tension, all the while playing the role of the loving, concerned wife. Juliette, for weeks, played her role flawlessly. She moved through her days with a practiced air of grief, her facade of the distraught wife so convincing that it elicited sympathy from even the most skeptical of neighbors. But beneath the surface, cracks began to appear. Her carefully constructed facade, like a poorly built stage set, threatened to crumble. The seeds of suspicion, once sown, grew with alarming speed, threatening to unravel Juliette's carefully constructed web of lies. The day Juliette Parker had meticulously planned for finally arrived. It was a day like any other, cloaked in the mundane routines of suburban life. Yet, for Juliette, it marked the culmination of weeks of calculated deceit. She saw her husband off that morning with a kiss and a promise of his favorite roast chicken for dinner. It was a performance she had perfected, her feigned concern masking the chilling reality of her intentions. With her husband gone, Juliette set her plan in motion. She called his cell phone repeatedly, letting it ring until it went straight to voicemail. Each unanswered call was another brick in the wall of her fabricated narrative. Later that evening, as dusk draped the town in an eerie stillness, Juliette made the call. Her voice, trembling with feigned distress, reached the 911 operator. The disappearance of Juliette's husband sent shockwaves through their quiet community. Neighbors, initially skeptical of Juliette's claims of his erratic behavior, rallied around her, offering comfort and support. They brought casseroles, shared memories of her husband, their words tinged with a mixture of concern and morbid curiosity. Juliette, basking in the warmth of their sympathy, played the role of the grieving widow to perfection. She attended candlelight vigils, her eyes downcast, her shoulders slumped with the weight of her fabricated sorrow. Behind closed doors, however, Juliette's facade began to crack. She found solace in the material comforts her newfound wealth provided. But the lie, like a bitter pill, was difficult to swallow. As weeks morphed into months, the initial shock of Juliette's husband's disappearance began to wane. The missing person posters, once ubiquitous, faded under the relentless summer sun. The townspeople, their lives moving forward, gradually retreated to the familiar rhythms of their routines. Yet, amidst the semblance of normalcy, whispers persisted. The police, despite Juliette's convincing performance, remained unconvinced by her account of her husband's disappearance. The more they dug, the more inconsistencies they unearthed. Juliette, sensing the net closing in, grew increasingly reckless. She threw lavish parties at her newly renovated home, her laughter echoing through the empty rooms. Her spending, once measured and calculated, spiraled out of control. She surrounded herself with new friends, acquaintances who knew nothing of her past. But her attempts to outrun the truth were futile. The police, armed with mounting evidence, brought Juliette in for questioning. Her carefully crafted world, built on a foundation of deceit, was on the verge of collapse. Juliette, despite her carefully crafted performance, couldn't completely erase her past. Her husband's disappearance, while initially shrouded in a veil of feigned concern, began to reveal glimpses of the truth beneath. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. A slip of the tongue during an interview, a flicker of panic in her eyes when confronted with a difficult question. The police, though initially sympathetic to Juliette's plight, began to notice these inconsistencies. Her story, carefully rehearsed and delivered with practiced emotion, lacked the raw, unfiltered grief of a truly bereaved wife. The townspeople, initially swayed by Juliette's performance, began to have their doubts. Their suspicions, once just murmurs in the wind, grew louder. Detective Michael O'Brien, a seasoned veteran of countless investigations, had a knack for seeing through deception. He had a way of reading people, of deciphering the subtle tells, the involuntary twitches, and fleeting expressions that betrayed even the most skilled liars. And something about Juliette Parker, despite her convincing performance, didn't sit right with him. He had seen countless grieving spouses, had witnessed the raw, unfiltered anguish of those who had lost their loved ones. But Juliette's grief, he observed, seemed staged, rehearsed, lacking the genuine depth of true sorrow. O'Brien, driven by a deep-seated sense of justice and an unwavering belief in his own instincts, decided to dig deeper. He meticulously reviewed the evidence, scrutinizing every detail. And slowly, like piecing together a shattered mirror, he began to see a different picture emerge. The breakthrough in the case came from an unexpected source, a discarded lottery ticket. Found crumpled in the trash can outside Juliette's home, it seemed like an insignificant detail. But O'Brien, with his meticulous attention to detail, recognized the significance of the find. The ticket, purchased just days after her husband's disappearance, was a winner, a substantial sum that explained Juliette's sudden influx of cash. This discovery set off a chain reaction. O'Brien uncovered a series of large cash withdrawals made in the weeks leading up to her husband's disappearance. The evidence, once scattered and seemingly unconnected, was now forming a damning narrative. The evidence against Juliette, once circumstantial, became insurmountable. The police, armed with a search warrant, descended upon the remote storage facility. Inside, they found Juliette's husband's belongings, his clothes, his art supplies, even his beloved paint-splattered easel. But the most damning discovery was yet to come. Buried under a pile of old blankets, the police found a suitcase. Inside, wrapped in heavy plastic sheeting, were the remains of Juliette's husband. Confronted with the overwhelming evidence, Juliette's carefully constructed facade finally shattered. The trial of Juliette Parker was a media spectacle. Cameras crowded the courtroom, their lenses capturing every detail, every tear, every flicker of emotion or lack thereof, on Juliette's face. The prosecution, armed with a mountain of evidence and Juliette's own chilling confession, presented a compelling case. The defense, hampered by the overwhelming evidence against their client, argued for leniency. They argued that her crime, while undeniably horrific, was a crime of passion. The jury, however, was unconvinced. After days of deliberation, they returned with a guilty verdict, finding Juliette Parker guilty of first-degree murder. Juliette Parker, once the picture of suburban normalcy, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The case of Juliette Parker, while shocking in its brutality, offered a chilling glimpse into the inner workings of a criminal mind. How could a seemingly ordinary woman, a devoted wife and loving mother, commit such a heinous act? What dark forces drove her to betray the trust of her loved ones and extinguish a life so callously? Experts, analyzing Juliette's psychological profile, pointed to a complex interplay of factors: a deep-seated sense of entitlement, a profound lack of empathy, and a chilling ability to compartmentalize her emotions. Juliette, they argued, saw the world as a game she was determined to win, no matter the cost. Her husband, in her mind, was an obstacle, a barrier to the life of luxury and freedom she so desperately craved. She viewed his inheritance not as a blessing for their family, but as rightfully hers, a reward for her sacrifices, her tireless efforts to maintain their comfortable life. Her lack of empathy allowed her to rationalize her actions, to distance herself from the emotional consequences of her crime. She saw her husband not as a loving partner, but as a pawn in her game, a means to an end. His life, his dreams, his very existence were insignificant compared to her own ambitions. The impact of Juliette Parker's crime reverberated far beyond the courtroom walls. The idyllic town, once a haven of peace and tranquility, was now forever marked by the specter of her betrayal. Neighbors, once quick to offer a friendly smile or a helping hand, now eyed each other with suspicion, their sense of security shattered, their trust irrevocably broken. The victims of Juliette's crime, the family and friends of her husband, were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. They grappled with the unimaginable grief of losing a loved one, their pain compounded by the brutal, senseless nature of his death and the shocking revelation of Juliette's betrayal. The community, in the wake of the tragedy, struggled to heal. Candlelight vigils were held, their flickering flames a testament to the enduring power of hope and remembrance. Support groups were formed, offering solace and understanding to those whose lives had been touched by the tragedy. Yet, the scars of Juliette's crime ran deep, a constant reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of even the most seemingly ordinary lives. The town, once a symbol of suburban tranquility, now served as a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that evil can wear many faces, that even in the most idyllic of settings, darkness can take root and flourish. The case of Juliette Parker, while undeniably tragic, offered valuable lessons if we are willing to heed them. It highlighted the importance of vigilance, of recognizing the subtle signs of manipulation and deceit. It underscored the need for open communication, for creating an environment where individuals feel safe to seek help and support when faced with personal struggles. Most importantly, it reminded us of the inherent strength and resilience of the human spirit. Even in the face of unimaginable tragedy, the community found ways to heal, to support one another, to rebuild their shattered lives. They honored the memory of the victim, not by dwelling on the darkness of his demise, but by celebrating the light he brought into their lives. The case of Juliette Parker, while a chilling reminder of the capacity for evil that exists within the human heart, also served as a testament to the enduring power of hope, resilience, and the unshakable belief in the inherent goodness of humanity. It reminded us that even in the darkest of times, even when confronted with the most unthinkable acts of cruelty, the human spirit has an extraordinary capacity to overcome adversity, to find meaning in the midst of suffering, and to emerge from the shadows stronger and more united than ever before.